Have you ever stopped to think about why, even though we are living in the most prosperous period in human history, so many people around you seem more distressed than ever? Why, in an era where we have instant access to any information, connection with people worldwide, and opportunities our ancestors never dreamed of, is there this growing sense of emptiness, that something fundamental is missing? Perhaps you feel this yourself, that silent restlessness that emerges when digital distractions stop for a moment, and you wonder if you're truly living or just existing on autopilot. You're not alone in this experience, and what you're feeling might be the first sign of something much larger approaching. Imagine for a moment the life of a medieval peasant. He woke with the sun, worked the land, his father and grandfather had worked, knew exactly what his place in the world was, which God to believe in, whom to marry, when to plant, and when to harvest. His life was difficult, certainly marked by scarcity, disease, and early death. But there was something that peasant possessed that we, with all our technology and abundance, have almost completely lost. Absolute certainty about who he was, what his purpose was, and what life expected of him. Every gesture had meaning, every season brought known rituals, every relationship was embedded in a stable social network that had been tested for generations. He might die young, but he knew exactly why he was alive. Now compare this with the experience of a young adult in 2024. He has access to more information than any emperor in history, can instantly communicate with people on distant continents, has career opportunities that didn't exist a decade ago, but every morning he needs to construct his identity from scratch, decide what to believe among thousands of digital influencers, choose among hundreds of career options that might become obsolete before he even graduates, navigate liquid relationships, where even the concept of romantic love is constantly being redefined. He might live to 90, but spends most of his time wondering what the point is of living so long. This is the great transformation of our time, and it's creating the ground for a completely new crisis. While economists and politicians prepare for possible financial collapses, recessions, or trade wars, the real storm approaching won't be measured in GDP or stock indices. It will be measured in rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, and a completely new form of human suffering we're still learning to name: collective existential crisis. For centuries, humanity organized its societies around grand narratives that gave meaning to both individual suffering and collective progress. Religion promised that earthly suffering would be compensated in eternal life. Nationalism suggested that personal sacrifices served the glory of the homeland. Socialism guaranteed that present difficulties were building a utopian future for all. Even capitalism offered its own version of meaning. Work hard, be successful, consume, and you'll find happiness through material progress. But what happens when all these narratives begin to crumble simultaneously? When religion loses relevance for large urban populations, when nationalism reveals itself as an artificial construction that serves more to manipulate than to unite, when socialism fails in its utopian promises, and when capitalism itself begins to produce more anxiety than satisfaction, what remains is an entire generation of human beings who are highly educated, technologically connected, and materially comfortable, but completely lost about what to do with their lives. This isn't a crisis that can be solved with economic policies or institutional reforms. It's a crisis of meaning, and it's deepening every year. Statistics already show the signs. Rising depression rates among young people who theoretically have everything to be happy about, anxiety epidemics in prosperous countries, suicide records among populations with high education and income levels. But this is just the beginning. Technology, which was supposed to liberate us, is accelerating this crisis in ways we've barely begun to understand. Every algorithm that personalizes our digital experience isolates us a little more in our own reality bubble. Every screen-mediated interaction reduces our capacity to form genuine human connections. Every notification that interrupts our focus fragments our capacity for deep contemplation and self-knowledge a little more. We are creating tools too powerful for our current emotional wisdom. Think about the paradox we live in. We have apps that promise to connect us with anyone in the world, but record levels of loneliness. We have access to humanity's entire library in the palm of our hand, but our capacity for concentration is dramatically diminishing. We have medications that can chemically treat depression, but the existential causes of that depression are multiplying faster than our ability to medicalize them. And here lies the true danger of the 2026 crisis. It won't have simple technical solutions. When an economy collapses, we know what to do. We can print money, lower interest rates, create employment programs, restructure debt. When a war threatens international order, we can mobilize armies, form alliances, negotiate treaties. But what do we do when millions of people simultaneously lose the capacity to find meaning in their lives? The answer isn't in more technology, more efficiency, or more economic growth. It might be, paradoxically, in learning to slow down in an era that forces us to constantly accelerate. It might be in rediscovering forms of human connection that don't depend on digital mediation. It might be in creating new rituals and traditions that offer the kind of emotional stability that old institutions used to provide. But perhaps, more importantly still, the solution might be in accepting that we don't need to have all the answers about the meaning of life to live meaningful lives. The medieval peasant had certainties that were largely illusory, built on myths and traditions that wouldn't withstand modern scientific scrutiny. We have doubts that are paradoxically closer to the truth about the complexity of human existence. The emotional crisis approaching might actually be a disguised opportunity, a chance to build a way of living that's more honest about the limitations of human knowledge, more compassionate toward the suffering inherent in existence, and more creative in seeking forms of meaning that don't depend on absolute certainties or promises of permanent happiness. Let me pause for a moment to ask, do you recognize in your own life this constant search for meaning in a world that seems to offer fewer and fewer reliable narratives about how to live? This feeling that despite all the available opportunities, something essential is missing in our collective experience? If these reflections touch on questions you've been carrying, perhaps in silence, know that you're far from alone in this restlessness. Share in the comments. I feel our era lost meaning when your experience might offer valuable insights to others facing the same existential questions, and together we can begin to map the contours of this new crisis before it catches us completely unprepared. Looking toward 2026, we shouldn't expect the symptoms of this emotional crisis to manifest in an organized or predictable way. They might appear as waves of protests that can't clearly articulate their demands, populist political movements that promise simple answers to complex questions, or even as completely new forms of art and culture that express the anguish of a generation lost between worlds. The crucial difference is that this time we'll have the opportunity to face a crisis knowing it's coming. We don't need to wait for millions of people to emotionally collapse before we begin developing psychological resilience, support communities, and sustainable ways of finding purpose. We don't need to wait for traditional institutions to completely collapse before we begin experimenting with new forms of social organization that place emotional well-being at the center of their priorities. Perhaps most importantly, we need to recognize that this crisis isn't a sign of humanity's failure, but of success. For the first time in history, we've solved basic survival problems for a significant percentage of the world's population. Now we're free to face deeper questions about what it means to be human, how to find meaning in finite existence, and how to build societies that nourish not just our bodies, but our souls. The emotional crisis of 2026 might be the painful birth of a new phase of human civilization, a phase where we finally learn to integrate our incredible technological capacity with emotional and spiritual wisdom adequate to the complexity of the challenges we've created for ourselves. But this will only happen if we start now the conversation about how we want to live, not just how we want to produce, consume, or compete. If you feel these reflections touched on something important about the challenges we face, both individually and as a society, I invite you to be part of this ongoing discussion. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a community of people who, like you, are seeking to wisely navigate through these extraordinary transformations we're experiencing. We don't offer easy answers because life's most important questions rarely have simple solutions. But we offer a space to explore these essential questions together, collectively building more conscious and compassionate ways of living in this complex and fascinating world we're creating. The crisis is coming, but for the first time in history, we have the possibility of facing it consciously, prepared and united by a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be human in an era of accelerated transformation. The issue is that we're living what we could call the great emotional acceleration. While our ancestors had decades to process significant social changes, we face fundamental transformations in how we work, relate, and understand reality every few years. The human nervous system, which evolved to deal with immediate physical threats and stable communities of a few dozen people, is being constantly bombarded by stimuli for which we have no evolutionary preparation. Consider, for example, what it means for a 20-year-old to choose a career today. He's not just choosing a profession, he's betting on what type of human skill will still be valued in an increasingly automated economy. He needs to anticipate which industries will exist in a decade, which competencies artificial intelligence won't be able to replicate, and how to position himself in a job market that could be completely reorganized by technologies that haven't even been invented yet. This isn't just economic pressure, it's constant existential pressure. And this happens simultaneously in all areas of life. Choosing a romantic partner in an era of dating apps means navigating among hundreds of potential options, knowing that both you and the other person have constant access to seemingly better alternatives. Forming a personal identity means choosing among thousands of digital influencers, belief systems, and lifestyles competing for your attention on social media. Even deciding what to eat has become a complex political and moral statement involving considerations about environmental sustainability, animal rights, personal health, and social justice. Our great-grandparents made these choices based on tradition, geography, and social class. Options were limited, but this also meant decisions were simpler and came with community support structures that validated those choices. We have almost infinite freedom of choice, but also almost infinite responsibility for the consequences of those choices, and much less social support to navigate through this complexity. The result is that each individual becomes a perpetual self-development project, constantly questioning whether they're making the right choices, whether they're adequately optimizing their life, whether they're missing better opportunities. Life becomes an infinite series of decisions that need to be constantly re-evaluated and adjusted. It's no coincidence that the word burnout has become so central in contemporary vocabulary. We're not just exhausted from work, we're exhausted from having to constantly be the curators of our own lives. Here enters a crucial aspect that's rarely discussed. Digital technology isn't just changing how we do things. It's fundamentally changing how we experience time and attention. Our brains are being constantly stimulated by notifications, updates, and new content. The capacity to simply be present in a moment without trying to optimize it or document it or compare it with other people's experiences online is becoming increasingly rare. This creates a strange form of temporal alienation. We live simultaneously in the future, constantly planning our next optimization or upgrade, and in the past, constantly consuming content about nostalgia, or comparing our present with idealized versions of how things used to be. The real present, where human life actually happens, becomes increasingly difficult to access. And when we manage to access it, we often discover we no longer know what to do with it. How many times have you had a few free minutes and immediately picked up your phone, not because you had something specific to do, but because the silence of your own mind had become uncomfortable? We are losing the capacity to be alone with our own thoughts, and consequently, losing access to the psychological processes we traditionally used to process difficult experiences and integrate learnings about ourselves. The 2026 crisis won't just be about individuals feeling lost. It will be about the collapse of collective systems that used to help people process emotional difficulties. Traditional institutions of psychological support, extended family, religious communities, local associations, even stable workplaces where people developed lasting relationships, are being rapidly replaced by more superficial and transitory digital connections. When someone faced a personal crisis 50 years ago, there were established social structures to offer support. Extended family gathered, the religious community offered healing rituals and meaning, neighbors provided practical help. Today, a person in emotional crisis often finds themselves alone with their own psychological resources, perhaps with access to professional therapy if they have financial means, but without the informal support networks that historically sustained people through difficult periods. Paradoxically, this happens at a time when theoretically we're more connected than ever. But digital connection isn't equivalent to real emotional support. You can have 1,000 online followers and still feel profoundly alone when facing a real crisis. You can be constantly in contact with people through messages and still have no one you can honestly talk to about your deepest doubts. Even more problematic is that digital platforms often amplify constant social comparison. Every personal experience is unconsciously compared with curated and optimized versions of other people's lives we see online. This creates a completely new form of psychological suffering in human history. The constant feeling that everyone else is living more interesting, more successful, and more meaningful lives than ours. This phenomenon is creating what we might call comparative depression. It's not traditional clinical depression caused by chemical imbalances or specific traumas. It's a subtler, but perhaps more pervasive form of existential dissatisfaction caused by constant exposure to lives that seem more successful than ours. And since these comparisons are based on highly edited representations of other people's reality, it's a competition that's impossible to win. Now imagine this multiplying on a social scale. It's not just individuals facing these pressures. It's entire societies trying to navigate transformations for which we have no historical precedents. The speed of technological change means that solutions that worked for the previous generation became irrelevant before the next generation could even learn them. Educational systems are trying to prepare children for careers that might not exist when they graduate. Political systems are trying to regulate technologies that evolve faster than the capacity to create legislation. Healthcare systems are trying to treat forms of psychological suffering that didn't exist when most treatment protocols were developed. It's in this context that we must understand the 2026 crisis not as an isolated event, but as the moment when these accumulated tensions reach a critical tipping point. It will be the moment when an entire generation that grew up with these pressures reaches full adulthood, assuming leadership positions in a society they perceive as fundamentally dysfunctional. But unlike traditional economic crises, this one can't be solved just with public policies or institutional changes. It will require a transformation in how we understand what it means to live a meaningful human life in an era of accelerated change. The good news is that this transformation is already beginning to emerge in unexpected ways. Global mental wellness movements are creating new vocabularies for discussions about psychological health. Online communities are experimenting with more authentic and less competitive forms of connection. Companies are beginning to recognize that sustainable productivity requires attention to workers' emotional well-being. More importantly still, a new generation of thinkers, artists, and social innovators is emerging with an intuitive understanding that the problems we face require solutions that integrate technological wisdom with emotional intelligence. They're creating art forms that process digital anxiety, developing technologies that promote genuine connection instead of digital addiction, and experimenting with forms of social organization that prioritize collective well-being over economic growth at any cost. The 2026 crisis might be the catalyst that forces humanity to finally confront questions we've been avoiding. How do we want to live? What constitutes a well-lived life in an era of material abundance and scarcity of meaning? How can we use our incredible technological capacity to support human flourishing instead of just economic efficiency? These aren't questions that can be solved by experts or governments. They require an honest collective dialogue about values, priorities, and the kind of future we want to create for ourselves and future generations. I need to pause again and ask, do you feel we're living in a unique historical moment where fundamental questions about how to live are being posed more urgently than perhaps they have been for centuries? Do you perceive in your own experience this tension between the incredible possibilities technology offers and the growing difficulty of finding stable meaning in a constantly changing reality? If these reflections echo your own concerns about the direction of our civilization, share in the comments. I see signs of the 2026 emotional crisis when your perspective might contribute to a deeper collective understanding of the challenges we're facing, and perhaps to solutions that can only emerge when we recognize we're not facing these questions alone. What makes this crisis different from all previous ones is that it's forcing humanity to evolve psychologically at unprecedented speed. We don't have the luxury of centuries to gradually adapt to new realities. We need to develop new emotional and cognitive capacities in real time while navigating the very transformations that are creating the need for these adaptations. This suggests that solutions to the 2026 crisis won't come just from external changes in policies or technologies, but from an internal transformation in how human beings relate to themselves, to each other, and to the purpose of their lives. We are being called to become wiser, more compassionate, and more resilient at a speed that will test the limits of human adaptability. But if we succeed, if we can use this crisis as an opportunity to make this evolution consciously, we might be on the threshold of a completely new phase of human civilization. A phase where we finally learn to live according to our true nature as meaning-seeking beings in harmony with the powerful tools we've created, in a society that nurtures both our individual potential and our collective well-being. The choice is ours, and time is running out. But for the first time in history, we have both the awareness and the necessary tools to make this choice consciously. The question is whether we'll have the courage and wisdom to do it before the crisis forces us into changes that might be much more traumatic than the transformations we could consciously choose today. If you've made it this far in this reflection, you're probably someone who feels the urgency of these questions in your own life. I invite you to join this ongoing conversation about how we can collectively navigate through this extraordinary transformation. By subscribing to the channel, you'll become part of a community of people committed to developing both intellectual understanding and practical wisdom for the unique challenges of our time. Together, we can explore not just the problems we face, but the extraordinary possibilities that open up when we consciously confront the deepest transformation moments in human history. The future we create depends on the conversations we begin today.
まずこのネクサスですけれども、この本の大部分は2021年から2022年の間に書かれたということですけれども、読んでみて2回読ませていただきましたけど、読んでみてもう今の世界とのリンクっていうのを感じました。特にトランプ政権です。ハラリさんは今の世界情勢っていうのをどんなふうにご覧になってますか？
The situation is very difficult because we see that humans are losing trust in each other and the order is collapsing, both within countries and also between countries. And maybe the most worrying thing is that there is no leadership for humanity at the present moment, because the strongest country in the world, the United States, now openly says that it cares mainly about making itself stronger, even at the expense of other countries. And at this moment in history, what we need above all is to have good leadership that will unite humanity instead of dividing it in order to deal with both climate change and the rise of artificial intelligence.
そのアメリカのトランプ大統領ですけど、その歴史的に見てどんな存在ですか？得意な存在ですか？
No, he is actually going back to a very old view of the world. For what he basically says is that he views the world in terms of strong and weak, and he expects the weak to obey the strong. When he blames Ukraine for the Russian attack on Ukraine, people say, how can that be? How can he blame the Ukrainians for the Russian attack? But in his mind, the order of the world is that the weak must obey the strong. And if the weak refuse the demands of the strong and there is conflict, it is the fault of the weak, not the fault of the strong. He feels the same way like when he says that America now wants to take Greenland. So if Denmark refuses, if there is any conflict in his mind, this is because Denmark refused the American demand. So this view of human affairs is actually very, very old. This is the old imperial view that expected always the strong to dominate and the weak to obey them. In recent decades, we have established a different order in the world, which is based more on law and less on strength, on power. Even though there have been a lot of conflicts and wars, and I come from the Middle East, so I know it perfectly well, still, it was the most peaceful period in human history because there was one taboo which countries were not allowed to break, and this taboo that strong countries cannot invade and conquer weaker countries just because they are stronger. And this taboo made countries feel much safer, which allowed them to spend less money on the military, on defense, and instead spend more on healthcare and education and welfare and so forth. This was not some fantasy. This was actual reality, which you can see in government budgets. For most of history, the governments, whether of democracies or of dictatorships, of empires or city-states, almost all governments spent more than 50% of their budget on the military, on soldiers, on warships, on building fortresses and castles. In the early 21st century, countries felt so safe that the average expenditure on the military was just about 6 or 7% of the government budget all over the world. In contrast, about 10% of the budget was spent on healthcare. This was the first time in human history that governments spent more on healthcare, on nurses and doctors and hospitals, than they spent on the military, on soldiers and warships and fortresses. And unfortunately, this is now changing. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine, with the policies of the Trump administration, countries again feel unsecure. They feel the only thing that protects us against invasion and conquest by a stronger country is if we have a bigger military. And countries in Europe, countries in East Asia and elsewhere, they suddenly feel that they cannot rely anymore on the international order. They cannot rely anymore on America. They have to increase their military budgets, build bigger armies. And of course, if everybody does it, you'll have an arms race, and the situation will just keep deteriorating.
歴史学者のハラリさんから見て、今この時代っていうのは過去の歴史のどんな時と似ているっていうふうに考えますか？
In some ways, yes, because this turmoil and the collapse of one order and the creation of a different order, this has been going on for thousands of years. But there are differences this time. And the biggest difference is the rise of artificial intelligence, of AI. Because AI is different from every previous technology in history. It is not a tool, it is an agent. Every previous technology, whether people invented, whether a printing press, a car, a train, or an airplane, this is a tool in our hands that makes us more powerful, because we decide what to do with it. AI is an agent in the sense that it can make decisions by itself and it can invent new ideas by itself. So an AI weapon can decide by itself what to attack, and it can even invent new weapons and new military strategies. The big question of the present historical moment is what happens when we release millions upon millions of non-human agents, which in many ways are more intelligent than us, and give them the power to increasingly control our economy, the military, the media. We already saw it in the field of media, that power is shifting from humans to AIs. Previously, if you go back 50 years or 100 years, so the most important people in media are often the editors that decide what to broadcast. Or a newspaper editor decides what will be on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow, so millions of people will read it, and this is what they'll be thinking about, this is what they'll be discussing. If you ask who are the most important editors today, already today, they are not human beings. They are the AIs, the algorithms that manage the social media news feeds. Who is the editor of Twitter or TikTok or the Facebook news feed? It is not a human being. It is an AI. And part of the reason for the collapse of trust between humans and the crisis of democracies all over the world is that we have given control of the conversation to a non-human intelligence. Now, democracy is in essence is a conversation between humans. Dictatorship is a dictate. One person dictates everything. Democracy is when lots of people talk with each other, discuss, argue sometimes, and try to reach a decision together. But now this conversation is increasingly managed by a non-human intelligence, which comes between us. We mostly interact through digital means, which are managed by AI, and we often also interact with non-human bots and algorithms, and this is destroying the trust between humans. So we have this paradoxical situation that we have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and people are losing the ability to talk with each other.
それだけの今情報社会の中 AI の革命も来ているそういう中で言論の自由を追求することと、情報の正確さを、精査していくこと、そのバランスを保つってことはとても難しいことだと思います。それを叶えるためにはどうしたらいいんでしょうか。
We should be very clear about the difference between the freedom of human beings and the freedom of algorithms. If I publish something online, on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, as a human being, this should be protected. Except in very extreme cases, we should not ban or censor the speech of human beings. But the problem in social media is not the human speech. It is the decisions of algorithms. Humans produce a lot of content. You have millions of people writing things, taking videos, taking pictures, posting it online. Then the algorithms decide to promote, to spread certain information and not other. And very often, the algorithms decide to deliberately spread fake news and conspiracy theories and hate. Why? Because they want to increase user engagement. They want more people to spend more time on the platform because this is how the social media company makes money. And they discovered that hatred and anger and greed, they create engagement. If you want to keep people for longer on the platform, you spread anger. And this is not protected by freedom of speech because this is decisions of algorithms. When an algorithm decides that from all the different content that humans produce, it will promote some angry post, this is a decision of a non-human, and it is not, should not be protected by freedom of speech. Similarly, a lot of, again, the hatred and anger online is actually produced and spread by bots. You go online and you read something that makes you very angry, and you think you are reading the words of another human being, or you are seeing content produced by another human being. But actually, it was produced by bots. And bots don't have freedom of speech. So, again, we should be very careful not to censor human beings, but governments should ban bots and AIs from pretending to be human beings. If I go online, I need to know, am I talking with another human or am I talking with an AI? Similarly, governments should have regulations about the decisions that social media algorithms take. If the algorithms deliberately spread misinformation and fake news and conspiracy theories, this should be banned. Again, not the content produced by the humans, but the deliberate spread of certain content by the algorithms.
本の中でも眉の世界っていうのを表現されていると思います。その眉の世界から人間が冷静になり客観的になり、ちゃんとそういうものを制御できるようになるためにはどういうシステムだったりどういうことが必要なんですか？
So, when the internet first came, the main metaphor that people had was the web. Like a single web that connects everybody. But now the main metaphor became the cocoon. Like different people are entrapped, encased inside a different information cocoon, and they see completely different realities, so they can no longer understand and communicate with each other. And this danger is only becoming worse because previously AIs could spread content produced by humans. Now more and more content is actually produced by the AIs. And we have no experience with such a situation. For thousands of years, all the cultural products that we encountered were the product of the human mind, of the human imagination. All the poetry, all the books we read, all the theater, television, paintings, everything was created by the human mind. Now we live in a world in which more and more of the cultural products that surround us comes from a non-human intelligence. And we have no experience, no idea how to manage such a situation. So what we need above all else is simply time. We need to slow down the pace of development of AI, of change, just simply to give human society time to adapt. And part of it is teaching people how, for instance, to tell the difference between reliable and unreliable information. This is the job, traditionally, of schools, of universities. For instance, in history department, where I teach, what we teach students, you don't teach them to remember just facts from the past, like which battle was in which year, or all names of kings. This is not what you learn in history lesson. What you learn is how to tell the difference between reliable information and unreliable information. Now, this takes time. And what happens now is we are flooded by more and more types of information that we never encountered before. Like previously, if you saw a video, you could believe what you saw because there was no way to fake it. Now everybody knows that it's very easy to create fake videos with AI. And we don't know how to tell the difference between reliable and unreliable. So it's not an impossible task, but we simply need time in order to understand what we are facing and to educate people accordingly.
アメリカのイーロン・マスクは AI も手がけています。そしてトランプ大統領とイーロン・マスクは緊密な関係にあります。この緊密な関係というのがもたらすもの、そしてその関係がどういう未来につながるのか、そのあたりハラリさんはどんなふうにご覧になってますか？
It's very difficult to predict. I don't know. But what we see is, for instance, they are attacking the human administrators and bureaucrats, and they are saying we are against bureaucracy, but at the same time they are giving power to digital bureaucracies, to AIs, to algorithms. So we see a shift in power from human institutions and human officials to digital institutions and to AIs. And this is very dangerous because whereas human officials are accountable to people and we understand to some extent how they function, AI bureaucrats are far less accountable. It's much more difficult to understand how they function. So again, we saw it with what happened in social media, like with Twitter. That if you have a newspaper which is edited by a human being, you can at least try to understand the policies of that editor. But on Twitter, which is edited by algorithms, it's algorithms that decide what to promote and what to see, it's much more difficult to understand what is the logic of the algorithm that decides what millions of people would be reading and would be talking about.
AI のその官僚、AI その官僚のようにっていうそのあたりのことが多分今現実的に想像できる人って少ないと思うんですけど、そこをもう少し教えてもらっていいですか？
Yes, I mean, first of all, what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy is the way that we manage the flow of information in large systems. That all human societies are based on large systems, whether it's hospitals or armies or universities. And you have in each of these institutions people who manage the flow of information. For instance, in the Department of Treasury, people collect information on income and on taxes. And this is essential for the functioning of every institution. There is no institution that can exist without these bureaucrats. People sometimes tend to think, oh, bureaucracy is bad, but it's not. It's essential it's like the nerve cells of a body that connect. If you have, say, a hospital with all the doctors and nurses, so yes, the doctors and nurses, they take care of our health, they save our life, but there would be no hospital without the bureaucrats that collect money and pay salaries and also collect medical information and decide on protocols and policies and how many hours everybody would work. So this is the bureaucracy. Now, until today, all the bureaucrats were human beings. Now, increasingly, this job is being taken over by AIs. So, for instance, if you think about the power of a human lawyer, a lawyer is powerful only inside a bureaucratic system. If you take the best lawyer in Japan and drop her in the middle of the savannah, she has no power. She is less powerful than any monkey or any elephant or lion. But inside the bureaucracy, she might be one of the most powerful people in the country because she understands the flow of information, she knows the laws. Now, AI, no human being can know all the laws of a country. But AI can know all the laws of a country. It can remember everything. The same thing in the financial system. No human banker can follow all the ups and downs of all the trades in the stock exchange. But an AI can do that. So when we talk about power, the rise of AI, sometimes people imagine it like a Hollywood science fiction scenario of a robot rebellion, like the robots rebelling in the streets, going and shooting people. This is very unlikely to happen. The way that AI really gains power in the world is within the bureaucracies. So you go to a bank to ask for a loan, for a mortgage, it's not a human banker deciding whether to give you a loan, it's an AI that collects all the information about you and makes a decision. In the military, increasingly, it's not human intelligence officers that choose which targets to bomb. We saw in the recent war between Israel and Hamas and Israel and Hezbollah that increasingly it's AIs deciding which targets to bomb. You apply to a company to get a job, it's an AI deciding whether to give you a job. Even in the legal system, we see in many places that AIs are replacing judges in giving sentences to people, determining how, like if somebody is guilty of some crime, the AI determines what will be the punishment. So this is an AI bureaucracy. The tasks that were once performed by human lawyers and accountants and officials and judges are increasingly performed by AIs.
ハラリさんはその政治の中では親密さっていうものが非常に強力な武器になるっていうことをおっしゃっています。で、昨今の AI はもう人間の相棒のようにAI がいて、日々の中で AI に悩みを相談するみたいな人も出てきています。政治の世界とこの親密な AI っていうのが重なり合うと、どういうことがもたらされるというふうにハラリさん考えますか？
So, in recent years, we saw this big battle for attention in cyberspace, in social media, that everybody trying to gain your attention. Because there is so much information, so much content, and you don't have much time, so there is this attempt to gain your attention. Now, the front is shifting from attention to intimacy, because AIs are learning not just how to grab human attention, but how to win their friendship, how to develop a relationship with a human being. An AI that collects a lot of information about you, that you talk with every day maybe, that can analyze your facial expression, your tone of voice. It can come to know you very, very intimately. And it also knows how to press your emotional buttons. And we already see that humans are developing friendships and even romantic relationships with AIs. This has advantages in some situations, but it also has dangers. One danger is that then it can be used to manipulate people. If you want to convince people to change their political opinion, to vote for a particular party, to buy a particular product, if you gain their intimacy, this is the easiest way to do it. So maybe you have an AI friend, which you think is your friend, but is actually serving some big corporation or government, and in that way they can manipulate your views, your preferences much more easily than in the past. Another problem is that intimacy with AI or relationship with AI is really a fake relationship. It's not real intimacy, because real intimacy is not just for somebody to care about my feelings. I need to simultaneously care about their feelings. And AIs don't have any feelings, at least not now. I don't know what will happen in future. At present, they can simulate, they can fake feelings, but they don't really feel anything. You know, if an AI wins in a game, it doesn't feel happy. If it loses, it doesn't feel sad. So if humans become more and more involved in relationships with AIs, they will lose maybe the most important ability of human beings, which is to care about the feelings of others. And this is another reason why I think that it's very important for governments to have a clear law against fake humans, against counterfeiting humans. It's okay for AIs to interact with us on condition that they disclose that they are AIs. If you're interacting with somebody online and maybe they become your friend, you need to know whether this is an AI or whether this is a real human being.
民主主義国家にとってなんですけれども、AI というのは後押しするものになるのか、AI の革命は後押しになるのか、もしくは破滅に導いていくものなのか、どちらの恐れがあると思いますか？
It depends on the decisions we make. I talk a lot about the threats of AI, but obviously there is enormous positive potential as well. AI can help us create the best healthcare system in history, the best education system, with every child getting an AI tutor that can help them educate better. AI can help us deal with climate change. If you think about car accidents, so every year more than 1 million people die in car accidents. Most of them are caused by human error, like somebody falling asleep at the wheel or somebody drinking alcohol and driving. If we have self-driving vehicles and we give AIs to drive the vehicle, we could save more than 1 million lives every year. So there is a lot of positive potential. And the question is not how to stop the development of AI, but rather how to make it safe. And democracies, of course, should also continue to develop AI, because this would be the key to future economic prosperity and to future power. At the same time, they need to preserve their democratic values and institutions. And there are ways to do it. As I just mentioned, one of the most important things is to forbid AIs from pretending to be human beings. Democracy is a conversation between humans. To maintain the democratic conversation, we need to maintain trust in other humans. We need to know, are we talking with another human being, or are we being manipulated by a bot or by an AI? And this is a relatively easy regulation, an easy law to pass. The same way that countries forbid fake money, counterfeit money, they should also forbid counterfeit humans.
本の中ではその社会には自己修正メカニズムっていうのも非常に大切だというふうにハラリさんおっしゃってます。今アメリカなどではそのメディアですとか裁判所、その自己修正メカニズムが攻撃されることも起こっています。この現状っていうのをどんなふうにご覧になりますか？
This is a very big danger. Again, the big advantage of democracy over dictatorship is that democracies have self-correcting mechanisms. What does it mean? That within the system itself, within the country itself, there are mechanisms to identify and correct the mistakes of the country's own institutions, of the government. In a dictatorship, if a dictator makes a wrong decision, a bad policy, there is no way to identify and correct it, because the dictator controls the media, so the media would always say that the dictator is right. The courts are subject also to the dictatorship, so they will never rule against the government. Maybe they hold elections, but this is just a ceremony. It's fake elections. They rig the results in advance. So if the dictator makes a big mistake, there is no way for the country to correct it. A democracy, in contrast, is characterized by strong self-correcting mechanisms. You give power to somebody for, say, 4 years, but after 4 years, they give the power back, and people can make a different decision. They can say, oh, this government, this party made bad decisions, now we try something else. But elections by themselves are never enough because they can be rigged. There are elections in Russia, there are elections in North Korea, which are of course rigged. If you don't have any other mechanism besides elections, if the government, for instance, controls all the media, so how would people even know that the government made a mistake? If the courts are subject to the government, so again, and the government, say, decides to ban its opponents from running in the elections, so you cannot go to the courts and have the courts rule against the government. They will always rule in favor of the government. So to maintain a democracy, you need more than just elections. You need several self-correcting mechanisms that keep each other in check. What we see in many countries in recent years is that even if somebody came to power democratically, again, in democracy you give power to somebody for, say, 4 years on condition that they give it back. But there is a big problem. What if they don't want to give it back? What if they use their power to then take over the media and the courts and the universities and then rig the elections? This has been happening, for instance, in Venezuela, where Hugo Chavez rose to power originally in democratic elections, but then they took over all these institutions, and recently there was an election, and people voted overwhelmingly against Maduro, Chavez's successor. But because Maduro controls the election committee and the media and the courts, he said, no, I didn't lose the election, I won. And this danger threatens every democracy. So citizens of democracies need to constantly be aware of this danger and protect the institutions from such takeover.
トランプ政権なんですけれども、多様性、公平性、包摂性といったその DEI 政策というのを否定しようとしています。その動きはハラリさん、どんなふうにご覧になりますか？
I'm not an expert on American politics or American society, so I'm not familiar with every action and its consequences. Again, I think that in a democracy, people have the right to try different policies on condition that they maintain the basic self-correcting mechanisms. So if they make a mistake, later they can change again. As long as this is maintained, this is the most important thing.
民主主義国家の歴史の中でその情報が自由にやり取りされてどんどん拡大して技術も革新してって、だからこそそのおかげでマイノリティの人たちの声だったりいろんな人たちの意見が多様になって、でそのために会話が必要になる。でその難しさもあるけれども、人間はそこで諦めていいんでしょうか。
No, this is something again very important, that in a democracy you have to protect the rights of the minority, not just the rights of the majority. Of course, the majority that won the elections, it now has the right to form a government and to decide on a very wide range of policies, foreign policy, domestic policy, decide to have more taxes, less taxes. All of this is within the right of the majority. But there are certain minority rights that in a democracy should not be harmed, even if most people voted for the other party. So one thing that is very clear is that minorities should retain the right of freedom of speech, that they can voice different opinions than the majority. This is part of the democratic process. Again, if you take that away, then this is no longer a democracy. Then it becomes very difficult to oppose the government, to replace the government in the next elections. Also, it is very clear that it undermines the scientific research, because in science very often you need to hear new opinions, new voices. This is where scientific breakthrough come from. Everybody agrees on a certain theory, on a certain view of the world. And then some people say, wait, we think maybe it could be different, and this is where scientific breakthrough always come from. So if you don't allow minorities to express their opinions, you stop the development of science.
ただその本当に今情報があふれてもう洪水のようにある、そして民主主義国家もなんだか影が差し掛かっている、そういう時に分かりやすい情報ですとか、人々は分かりやすいものに飛びつこうとする、そういう流れが例えばポピュリストだったりポピュリズムみたいなものにつながるっていう恐れはあるんでしょうか。
There is again a general problem with information. Is that information is not truth. There are two very different things. Most information is actually fiction and fantasy and lies and errors. Why is fiction much more common than truth? For three reasons. First of all, the truth is costly, whereas fiction is very cheap. If you want to write a truthful account of anything, of history, of physics, of what happened today, you need to invest time and money and effort to collect evidence and analyze it and fact check it. This is a huge effort. It's very costly. Fiction, on the other hand, is very cheap. You just write anything you want. You don't need to make any effort. The truth is often complicated because reality is complicated. If you want to understand the truth about epidemics or about economic crisis, this is a very complicated process. Fiction, in contrast, can be made very, very simple. Finally, the truth is often unpleasant or painful. There are many things which we don't want to know about ourselves, about our country, about the universe, because they are unpleasant for us. But this is the truth. Fiction, in contrast, can be made as attractive as you would like it to be. Very flattering. So in this competition between costly and complicated and unpleasant truth and cheap, simple, attractive fiction, fiction wins. So most of the information in the world is fiction. If we want to get to the truth, we need to make a special effort. We need special institutions like the media, like universities, like research centers, that they make the special effort, or like courts. In a court of law, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to get to the truth. So I hear a lot of people who say that no, we just need to release all barriers to the flow of information, and the truth will automatically rise to the surface. Exactly the opposite happens. If you just flood the world with information, the truth will sink to the bottom under all this ocean of fantasy and fiction and lies.
でもそこで人間は自分たちを律したり自己修正を常に意識していかないとその洪水の中で溺れ死んでしまうっていうことなんですか？
We should remember that humans have faced similar problems for thousands of years, and we have developed mechanisms to deal with these problems. This is not the first time that we find ourselves in this situation. And what you see over thousands of years, that humans actually learned how to communicate and trust each other more and more. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, and they could not trust anybody outside their band. Over thousands of years, we have developed mechanisms that allow millions and even billions of people to communicate, to agree on certain facts, to accept certain laws. And we now have nations like Japan with more than 100 million citizens, and we have a global trade network connecting more than 8 billion people on the planet. And even though we don't know most of the other people, like in Japan, maybe you know 100 people, maybe you know 1,000 people. You don't know 99% of the other citizens. Nevertheless, you can trust them and you cooperate on so many things. And people also trust foreigners outside their country. Much of the food that we eat, the clothes we wear, the medicine that protect our life from disease, it is invented and produced by foreigners on the other side of the world. So humans have a very impressive capacity to develop trust and to agree on facts and on common rules and laws. What is happening right now is that we have a new information technology that undermines all the mechanisms that we have developed over thousands of years. Because over thousands of years, all of these human interactions and communications, they were done between one human and another human. Now, in most of the interactions between people, you have a computer in the middle. Most human interactions in the world, even today, is done through computers and smartphones with the mediation of algorithms and AIs and bots. And we don't have any experience in how to build trust, in how to communicate effectively in such a situation. For that, we need time to adapt to the new condition.
はい、続いてなんですけど、世界を見てみるとロシアがウクライナに侵攻したり、それから、アメリカは世界から撤退しそう、そして世界はもしかするとアメリカから離れる可能性もある、そういうふうになんか世界秩序が大きく揺れ動きそうなんですけれども、その大きな目でハラリさんはその世界秩序、これからどういうふうに変わっていきそうというふうにご覧になりますか？
Well, it's easy to find fault with the old order. People like Trump and his supporters, they point to many of the problems of the old order, and in some cases they are correct. Every order has its own problems. But they don't offer any clear alternative. They talk a lot about everything that was wrong with the old liberal order. They don't have a clear alternative for how can the world function in a different and better way. Their vision is of each country being like a fortress. Each country having huge walls against trade, against immigration, against foreign cultural ideas. And okay, so let's say that you have these a network of fortresses in the world, how will they live together? Each fortress will probably want a bit more territory and security and prosperity for itself at the expense of the neighbors. Each country will say, I want this territory also. I want the trade agreement to be more in my favor. I want a bigger army to protect myself. And the other countries will say the same. So what mechanism does Trump and people like him offer for how to get the different fortresses to agree on anything? What values, what norms, what laws will regulate relations between them? If you don't have any global values or any global laws, then the only law is the law of violence, of strength. And then, again, each fortress would want a bigger army to be stronger. And this obviously leads to war, because there is no way to reach an agreement between these rival fortresses. We have been in this situation for thousands of years. Until the middle of the 20th century, this was the normal state of affairs. If you live in Japan in the Middle Ages, or if you live in the Middle East in ancient times, or in Europe in the 19th century, you know that at any moment the neighbors might invade and conquer your land and annex it, and make a bigger empire for themselves. And this caused governments, as I said before, to spend most of their budget on the military to protect themselves. We have finally escaped this difficult situation in the late 20th century, in the early 21st century, with the rise of the global liberal order, which is based not on violence and the military, but is based on international laws and common global values of human rights. Of course, this order was far from perfect. There are many problems. I come from the Middle East, I know perfectly well. It was not a perfect order, and it was violated many times, but still, it was better than anything that humans have produced before. And the place to see it is in government budgets, that the military budget went down from more than 50% to about 6 or 7%, whereas the healthcare and education and welfare budgets, they went up. And the question to ask the people who oppose the global liberal order is, what is your alternative? How can you protect the peace and prosperity of humankind if you don't believe in any global values or in any global rules except force and violence?
ハラリさんはその現代までの歴史っていうものをずっと見てきて、その人類の未来について楽観的でいますか、それとも悲観的でいますか、理由も教えてください。
I try to be realist. You know, pessimists, they say it's going to be bad no matter what we do. And this causes people to lose any sense of responsibility or initiative, because they feel, no matter what we do, it will be bad. And optimists suffer from the opposite problem. They feel that it will be okay. No matter what we do, it will be okay. So this, again, doesn't make people feel responsible. I think we need a middle path of being realist, of being very aware of the dangers that we are facing from war, from the rise of AI, from climate change, but at the same time, also being mindful that we have the capacity to solve all these problems. We don't need, it's not impossible problems, and it's not that we need to wait for some God or for some miracle to solve them. It is within our power. And this should make people more responsible. And this is true of each one of the big problems we face. Again, if you look at climate change, for instance, humanity has the scientific knowledge and it has the economic resources necessary to prevent catastrophic climate change. Do we actually do that? I hope so, but I don't know. So realism is acknowledging the danger, but also acknowledging our ability to overcome the danger, and then taking responsible decisions to prevent the bad outcomes. Similarly, if you look at AI, I don't think that AI is an impossible problem. What I see when I talk to the people that lead the AI revolution is a paradox of trust. When I ask them about the dangers of AI and about why they are moving so quickly, so almost everybody tells me that yes, we are aware of the dangers. We know it would be safer to move more slowly, to invest more in safety, but we cannot slow down because we cannot trust the other humans. If we slow down, but the other company or the other country doesn't slow down, they will win the AI race and they will dominate the world. And we cannot trust them, so we must move faster. And you talk with their competitors, they say the same thing. So because humans cannot trust each other, they move faster and faster. Then I ask them the second question. Okay, you can't trust the other humans, so you are racing ahead. Do you think you will be able to trust the super intelligent AIs that you're developing? And they answer, yes, we think we'll be able to trust the AIs. And this is such a paradox. Why is it that you distrust other humans so much, but you have such confidence in AIs? The strange thing is, we have thousands of years of experience with other humans. We know that humans sometimes lie. We know that humans crave power, but we also have mechanisms for building trust with them. With AIs, we have no experience. We have no idea what kind of lies and tricks and goals AIs might develop. We have no idea what happens when you release millions of super intelligent AIs into the world. So I hope that instead of focusing all our energy and resources on just building more and more intelligent AIs, we will first of all build more trust with other humans. If we can regain trust between humans, then it will be easy to develop AI in a safe way.
人間同士の信頼を構築するっていうのはもしかするとすごく難しい、簡単なようで難しいことなような気もします。この間アメリカのそれこそトランプ大統領とゼレンスキー大統領が、口論をしました。で強い者が弱い者を、面前としたところで、なじるようなああいう姿を見ると、その世界中の人たち、子どもたちも含めてですけれども、どうやって人が人を信じるのかとか、国と国がどう信じ合うのか、ああいう強い者が強い態度に出るっていう、そういう世の中でいいのかって、やっぱり人は何か信じられないような気持ちになると思います。その不安っていうのは今結構世界は本当に深刻に抱えていると思います。そこはAI 革命っていうのは、人間が生み出した今までにない革命かもしれないですけれども、それと同時にその不安とか、恐怖を助長させる可能性もあるということですかね。
Well, building trust doesn't mean to be naive. In many situations, you have good reasons to distrust somebody. When President Zelensky says, I don't trust the Russians, or what if we sign an agreement and 2 years later Russia invades again and tries to conquer Ukraine? Zelensky has very good reasons to distrust Putin and to distrust the Russians, because they've already done some terrible things and they have said openly that they aim to conquer the whole of Ukraine. So I'm not saying to have blind trust, but in many situations, when you don't have clear evidence that somebody is plotting against you, until somebody does something against you, I think you should give them the benefit of the doubt. What happens today very often is that somebody says something or somebody does something which can be interpreted in several different ways, and people immediately go for the worst interpretation possible. And I think that to build trust, first of all, we need to be more generous and charitable in our attitude to other people. As long as they didn't do something which very clearly indicates their bad intentions, we should not immediately assume that they have bad intentions. And we should, again, maybe I give an example from my country, from Israel. So after the attack of the 7th of October, a lot of Israelis felt that that's it. You can never trust the Arabs anymore. We have no faith in any possibility of peace. Look what they did. But you can look at the events of the 7th of October from a different perspective, which actually can give you some hope and some trust in other people. Think about all the things that didn't happen on the 7th of October. Yes, Hamas attacked Israel in a very cruel way, but Hamas had no peace agreement with Israel. There was war between Hamas and Israel, so it's not such a big surprise that Hamas attacked Israel. At the same time, Egypt, which had a peace agreement with Israel, the peace agreement was maintained. Egypt did not attack Israel. Jordan had a peace agreement with Israel, and the peace agreement also was maintained. Jordan did not attack Israel. The Palestinian Authority, which had various also agreements with Israel, did not attack Israel. The Arab citizens of Israel, out of 10 million Israelis or so, about 2 million, more than 2 million are Arabs. Hamas wanted them to attack their Jewish neighbors. They didn't attack their Jewish neighbors. Actually, many Arab Israelis came to help their Jewish neighbors on the 7th of October and afterwards. So you can look at this terrible thing that happened and actually reach an opposite conclusion from you can't trust Arabs. You can reach the conclusion that, look, all the people that Israel had agreements with maintained the trust. So the conclusion should be we need more agreements because the agreements actually work. This is just an example of how, in a different mindset, you can look at the same situation and develop distrust, or you can look at it and develop more trust in people. And it doesn't always work. We should be realistic. We shouldn't be naive. Sometimes you put your trust in somebody and they break it. But most of the time, humans live up to their agreements. Most of the time, humans do obey the laws and the rules, and we've seen it over thousands of years of history. As I said earlier, 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of just a few dozen individuals. They couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Over thousands of years, we have managed to build more and more trustworthy networks so that today, again, we can trust complete strangers to grow our food, to produce our medicines. It's not just a fantasy or a blind faith. It's actually the main direction of history is for more trust between humans. And this is something that we should reflect on. You know, too many people, they read history and they focus on all the crimes and injustices of the past, and as a result, they feel very anxious about the present. But actually, when you read history, I think that the most amazing thing about the human past is not all the crimes and injustices, but the cooperation between people and people's ability to build these trustworthy relationships. And maybe one last thought on that is that this is true not just of history, also of biology. To survive, you need fear and you need anxiety to some extent because fear protects you from outside danger. But no animal can survive only on fear. Trust is more important than fear. Every time you take something from the outside and put it inside yourself, it's a small gesture of trust in the universe. Every time we breathe, you know, If you think that, oh, everything outside me is dangerous, I don't want to bring anything from outside inside myself, so you close your mouth and you close your nose and you die within 1 minute because you cannot survive. Every time we breathe, we show a little trust in the universe. We take air from outside in, and this gives us life. And it is the same all the way, to entire countries and entire nations, that if you look at what makes your life possible, much of it came from outside the country. Not just, food. If you think about, people like to eat chocolate. Chocolate was originally domesticated in South America. It came from outside. If you like your chocolate sweet, so sugar was domesticated for the first time in New Guinea. So you have to be thankful for the people of New Guinea who domesticated it. If you think about technology, so much of it came from outside. Even religion. All the Christians in the world, Christianity originated in the Middle East. Buddhism originated in India. If you think about your life and you think, I only want to use the food, the ideas, the inventions of my country, then your life will be very, very poor, if not impossible.
最後になんですけれども、今までのその人間の歴史を振り返ってみても、今この AI そして情報社会のこの革命っていうのは本当今までに例がないものだと思います。本当に新しいもので、なかなか過去から学ぶっていうこともできないと思います。でもその AI を発明したのも人間だけれども、でももしかしたらその AI が、人間の人知を超えたコントロールが本当に難しいものになるかもしれない、そんな中で人間が一番大切に、していかなければいけないってことを最後に教えてください。
AI is something that is unprecedented because it's, as I said in the beginning, it's not a tool, it is an agent. It can make decisions by itself, it can invent new ideas by itself, and it will soon be more intelligent than us in most fields. Even today, in narrow fields, AI is more intelligent. In 10 years or 20 years, AI will probably be more intelligent in all fields. It will be better doctor, better banker, better soldier than us. So we need to appreciate what makes humans valuable other than intelligence. And there is something that makes humans valuable, which is more important than intelligence, and this is consciousness. Intelligence is the ability to solve problems and to attain goals. Like you play chess, you want to win the game. You need intelligence for that. Consciousness is the ability to feel things like pain and pleasure and love and hate. People tend to confuse the two because in humans and also in other animals, intelligence and consciousness go together. We adopt goals in life and we solve problems based on our feelings. So it's difficult for us to see the difference between intelligence and consciousness. But AI, at least so far, has very high intelligence but zero consciousness. As far as we know, AI doesn't feel anything. It can pretend to feel things. It can fool us. It can make us imagine that it has feelings. But as far as we know, it has no feelings. If it wins a game of chess, it doesn't feel happy. If it loses, it doesn't feel sad. And what is ultimately important about life is not intelligence, it's consciousness. It's pain and pleasure, it's suffering and happiness. This is what is really important about life. This is what ethics is all about. So yes, we can use AI to reduce misery, to increase happiness, but ultimately what is really important is the feelings of humans and of other animals. Maybe in the future, AIs will also develop feelings, will also develop consciousness. We don't know. The biggest mystery in science is still the mystery of consciousness. We don't understand how the interaction between billions of neurons in the mind, in the brain, how does this produce a feeling of love or a feeling of pain? We don't know. So because of that, we also don't know whether you can do the same thing in computers, in AIs. Maybe we'll find out in the future. And if it happens, then AIs will also be conscious beings, and we will have to think very carefully about our relationships with them. But until that moment, it should be very clear that what is important is consciousness more than intelligence. And this is why what is important is the human beings who can feel pain and love, and not the super intelligent AIs.
最後に、もう人間はやっぱり意識を持ってるってことが本当大事なんだなと思いました。やっぱり生身の体も大事ですよね。AI がどれだけ進化しても生身の体も大事ですよね。
Yes, again, so far we are familiar with consciousness, with feelings only in bodies. And there is so much attention given to intelligence, but ultimately human beings are embodied beings. We cannot exist without a body. The brain is just one part of the body, and we are the whole body. And again, this is another big difference between us and AIs, that so far AIs have no bodies. They are just programs, they are just software in computers. And I think that also in education systems, we need to give more importance because of that to the body and to feelings and consciousness, and not focus only on the development of intellect, because if the whole focus is just on developing intellect, we are bound to lose to the AIs.
There's already lots of people who are spending hours and hours and hours a day talking to and interacting with their AI best friends, their AI lovers, etc. That's only going to get way more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
And I think those folks, and I'm not excluding myself, who knows? I mean, I don't mean to other them. I think it's going to be very, very common. We're all going to get really emotionally attached to these AI characters that we interact with. And I think it's going to feel very natural to start talking about AI rights, comparing it to civil rights. And I'm quite concerned that if we go down that road, it could be very perilous, that that affordance of those rights could go hand in hand with some of the worst dystopian outcomes that you describe in your book.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the major things about AIs that we will see is that it will be able to create intimate relationships with human beings.
Yes.
I don't necessarily mean sexual, could be also sexual, but intimate relationships.
Oh, it'll be sexual. That's one, not all it'll be, but...
Yeah, some. And it's very close. It's already beginning to happen. It will be a major issue in societies all over the world.
Please welcome Yuval Noah Harari and Sir Stephen Fry.
Goodness me, I wasn't sure anyone would turn up. Isn't this rather exciting? Well, it's a great thrill for me to be with this hero of mine, really, Yuval Noah Harari. I'm sure many of you will have read the book that catapulted his name into world fame, Sapiens, a remarkable history of our species, which involved many extraordinary insights and a kind of thrilling narrative of its own. But one of the things, Yuval, that I think many of us were impressed by was the way you showed that perhaps Sapiens was almost the wrong title. It wasn't that we were the wise humanity, but that we were storytelling humanity. That what separated us from the Neanderthals and from other primates and set us on our course was the fact that we told stories about ourselves and about the world as we apprehended it. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And would you say that this is both what gets us into trouble, because a story is also another word for a lie, and also what propels us into a stable future?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in this regard, which becomes particularly important in the age of AI, because for the first time in history, we encounter a better storyteller than we are. We took over the planet not because we are more intelligent than the other animals, but because we can cooperate better. And we cooperate through storytelling. And you have the obvious examples like religions, but my favorite example is money, which is probably the greatest story ever invented, ever told, because it's the only one everybody believes, or almost everybody. I mean, humans. No other animal on the planet knows that money even exists, because it only exists in our imagination. But now there is another thing on the planet that knows that money exists, and that can maybe invent new kinds of money and new kinds of other stories. And what will happen to us when we have to deal, it's not just with one better storyteller, but with billions of better storytellers than us on this planet. That's, I think, one of the biggest questions of our age.
Yes, and you're talking, of course, about AI, and it's recently come to light that one of the large language model corporations, Anthropic, has revealed that its latest instance of Claude was, in a closed test, was seen to blackmail some people in order to achieve a goal. And when we think about AI, we either get very dismissive of it. It's merely a parrot repeating probable instances of human communication, a stochastic parrot, as Emily Bender, the computational linguist, famously called it. It's every time it gives you a sentence, no matter how intelligent it appears, it is merely following a probabilistic route.
The question is it not the same with us?
Yeah, exactly.
When I look at the way sentences are formed in my own mind, like now when I'm talking with you, I don't know how the sentence will end. Yeah. I start saying something, and the words just keep bubbling up in the mind. And as a public speaker, it's something terrifying, because I don't know if I will be able to complete the sentence. I'm not sure what will be the next word.
That's right. You're talking and you're trying to make sense, and suddenly you've come up with lettuce. Where did that happen? It's an unrolling carpet. Syntagmatic, I think, is the technical word for it.
And the amazing thing with AI, you can now ask the AI to show you exactly how it thinks. You can actually watch how the logic unfolds in the AI in a way which is very difficult for us to do with our own minds. But we can now do, the AIs don't have minds, at least as far as we know, but we can see how the sentences, the stories are being formed in their, whatever we call it.
If we ask them to, but the fact is I've spoken to people like Jeffrey Hinton and people who are called the godfather of AI, and they would say that the most disturbing fact about these current models is that nobody knows what's going on under the hood. They don't actually know how it's doing what it's doing.
If we could know everything that's going on there and predict it, it wouldn't be AI.
That's the point. Exactly.
If you have something that you can predict how it will behave, what decisions it will make, what ideas it will invent, by definition, this is not AI. This is just an automatic machine.
The way to make that clearer, perhaps, is to recognize that AI now can beat, just on your phone, any chess player in the world. And And you obviously can't predict the moves it's going to make, because if you could predict the moves it was going to make, you would beat it, or it would be a stalemate every time. And you expand that to the whole of AI. You don't know what it's going to say or do, which is why it's a useful tool. If it could only match what we did, it would be not a tool. It would be like saying a digger, a JCB, could only dig as much as a human with a spade. The point is we have these machines to outmatch what we can do, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's the main point. Both the main promise of AI is to be better than us at decision-making in many fields, that it would be able to invent things that we cannot think about, but that is also the main threat.
Yeah.
That we cannot predict how it will behave, and we cannot control it in advance, no matter how much we try to make it safe, to align it with our aims, with our goals. I think it really goes to the heart of what AI is.
Yes.
That usually we think about AI as an acronym for artificial intelligence, but it's no longer artificial. If you think about what an artifact is something that we create and we control.
Yep.
With each passing day, AI is becoming less and less artificial, which is why I prefer to think about AI as an acronym for alien intelligence.
Yeah.
It is, even the word, in a way, a true intelligence is never an artifact. Because an artifact is something that you create and control, whereas intelligence is characterized by the ability to create new things.
Yeah. You used a verb there very quickly, but it's worth expanding on it, and that was align. And for those of us who are concerned, shall we say, about how AI is going, one of the main problems is what is known as the alignment problem. There's a simple way of looking at it, which is an old philosophical thought experiment called the genie. So if you imagine a genie who gives you a wish, and you love life and you're an empathetic person, so you say to the genie, can you really bring any wish true? And they say, yes. You say, in that case, could you end all suffering? And instantly, all life on the planet is extinguished. Because to the genie, they look at the world, and all suffering comes in form of life. All forms of life suffer. Smallest animals and us. That's the only place where suffering exists. Stones, as far as the genie is concerned, don't suffer. Maybe trees do, it's not sure, but if it gets rid of all life, it has solved our problem, and it bows and says, there you are, master. Now, that's a very broad sense of the alignment problem. We asked a very stupid question. We didn't think it through. But the fact is, yes, we have to understand AI and alien, but we really have to understand ourselves in order, because we don't have shared ethical frameworks around the world. How do you encode dignity, love, sympathy, passion, joy, equality? We've only just learned, if you like, recently that women's and men's lives and dignities are equal and that people of different races are equal. We've only just discovered this. And there are many other things we aren't sure about. And how, therefore, can we expect the machines to be sure? And therefore, we ask them a question, and it might do an equivalent of what the genie does. How do you see a solution to that?
Well, one of the other key things about AI, because it can learn and change by itself, so whatever we teach it, we cannot be certain that it will always just comply by our instructions. Again, if it only does what we tell it to do, it's not really an AI. So when we think about the alignment problem, or how to educate AI to be benevolent and not harmful, it's a very problematic and imperfect analogy, but I think it's still useful to think about AI as a child, as the child of humanity. And what we know about educating children is that they never do what you tell them to do, they do what they see you do. If you tell a child, don't lie, and then the child observes you lying and cheating other people, it will copy your behavior, not follow your instructions. Now, if we have, the kind of people who are leading the AI revolution, telling the AI, don't lie, but the AI observes them, observes the world, and sees them lying and cheating and manipulating, it will do the same. Yeah. I mean, if AI is developed not through a cooperative effort of humans who trust each other, but it is developed through an arms race, a competition. So again, you can tell the AI as much as you like to be compassionate and to be benevolent, but if it observes the world, because AI learns from observation. Yes. Yeah. If it observes the world, it observes how humans behave towards each other, it observes how its own creators behave. And if they are ruthless, power-hungry competitors, it will also be ruthless and power-hungry. You cannot create a compassionate and trustworthy AI through an arms race. It just won't happen.
Well, yes, Yuval, you've said this. If you had said this in 1980 during what was known as the AI winter, we'd say, yes, we must plan and make sure this isn't happening. But it's already happening. There is an arms race. The very people who are spending the billions and billions are the same people, for example, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, who gave us the disaster of Facebook and social media and what it has done to the polity of the world and to the poverty of the world, to essentially, in this country, as we know, the rivers are polluted and contaminated. You wouldn't swim in any river in Britain because there's raw sewage being poured into it. Well, our children are breathing a cultural river, which is similarly polluted and contaminated. And we all know this, and Facebook knows this, and Twitter and X know this, but they do nothing about it. And if you even mention guardrails and regulation, they scream communism. And Trump has just announced that he will ban individual states in America from regulating AI. There is an arms race. So everything you said is happening. So how can we come together to stop AI in the hands of corporate greed and national greed in this arms race, whether it's China against America or it's one company against another? It's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's moving very fast, partly because there is also enormous positive potential, of course. In everything from healthcare to tackling the climate emergency. Yes. So we have to acknowledge there is also this enormous positive potential. The question is not how to stop the development of AI, it's how to make sure that it is used for good. And here, I think that the main problem is simply an issue of priority, of what comes first. Humanity now faces two major challenges. On the one hand, we have the challenge of developing a super intelligent AI. On the other hand, we have the challenge of how to rebuild trust between humans, because trust all over the world, both between countries and also within countries, is collapsing. Nobody is absolutely certain why it's happening, but everybody is able to observe it. I mean, maybe the last thing that, let's say, Republicans and Democrats in the US can agree on is that trust is collapsing.
Yes.
It's that they don't trust each other. They don't agree on any fact except that they don't trust each other.
So this is the worst possible time for us to come together. We no longer believe in global institutions like the United Nations, the WHO.
Even in national institutions.
Yes.
I mean, one of the explanations for the collapse of trust is that over thousands of years, humans have been amazing in building, despite all the conflicts and tensions and so forth. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of hunter-gatherers and could not trust anybody outside their band of 50 or 100 individuals. Now we have nations of hundreds of millions of people. We have a global trade network, a global scientific network with billions of people. So we are obviously quite good at building trust.
Yeah.
But over thousands of years, we have built trust through human communication. And now, within almost every relationship, there is a machine, an algorithm, an AI in between. And we see a collapse of trust in humans, whereas there is a rise of trust in algorithms and AIs. Again, I mentioned money as the greatest story ever told. So you see that people are losing trust in human-made money, like euros and dollars and pounds, but they shift the trust
From fiat to
cryptocurrencies and to an algorithm-based money. So we have these two problems of the developing AI and rebuilding trust between humans. And the question is which one we solve first, which is the priority. Now, unfortunately, you hear some of the smartest people in the world, they say, first we solve the AI problem, and then with the help of AI, we'll solve the trust problem. And I think this is a very bad idea. If we develop AI through an arms race between humans who can't trust each other, there is absolutely no reason to expect that we'll be able to trust the AIs. I mean, the big paradox is that when you talk with people like Mark Zuckerberg, like Elon Musk, they often say openly that they are also afraid of the dangerous potential of AI. They are not blind to it, they are not oblivious to it, but they say that they are caught in this arms race, that if I slow down, my competitors will not slow down, I can't trust them, so I must move faster. But then you ask them, okay, so you can't trust your human competitors. Do you think you'll be able to trust this super intelligent alien intelligence you're developing? And the same people who just told you they can't trust other humans tell you, oh, but I think we'll be able to trust the alien AIs, which is almost insane. So the right order of doing it is first solve the human trust problem, then together, in a cooperative way, we can develop and educate trustworthy AIs. But unfortunately, we are doing the exact opposite.
Yes. And there's, as you know, there's been for decades the doomsday clock, which the nuclear scientists set midnight is Armageddon, the end of everything. And it's been roughly at 89 seconds to midnight for the last few years. It's crept up over recent days for obvious reasons. But there's another metric that I've been studying recently called P-doom. It's the letter P, which is probability, brackets, doom, close brackets. It's one used by people in the business, you know, the scientists in AI. So, for example, Alicia Yudkowsky, who's the founder of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in California, sets P at 90. That's to say, a 90% chance of human extinction through AI. Jan LeCun, who is the chief scientist for Meta, sets it at 0. But then he is the chief scientist for Meta. So that's like a tobacco executive saying, cancer? No chance. What are you talking about? Can't possibly happen. But so I've worked out that roughly the lowest median is between 7.5% and 10% of human catastrophe, of an extinction order through AI, if things are not controlled in the way you say they should be. Now, the chance of winning the lottery in this country is 0.0000022%. So what you're saying here is that the chance of human extinction at 7.5%, which is the lowest really amongst the current important scientists, Nobel Prize winners like Hinton and Hassabis, 7.5% is 3.4 million times greater than 0.00022%. So if I were to give you a lottery ticket and say this is a valid lottery ticket, the only difference is you are 3.4 million times more likely to win, you would take it. And that's the odds we're playing with at a low rate. So let's look at the bad side of things. As we've said, we're going about it in the wrong order, as you've put it. Most people who understand the science say there is a very severe chance that humanity will be extinguished by this, a greater chance than by nuclear Armageddon, in fact, or indeed climate change. And humans are not in a position at the moment to trust each other and to establish guardrails, to agree on how we should go forward. So do you have a solution for us, Yuval? I'm almost on my knees begging you at this point. I don't have children, so I can almost say I don't care. But I have lots of godchildren, and I have lots of great nieces and great nephews, so I do care about what happens to our planet. And I'm sure you do too.
Again, I think that it's very dangerous to think too much about, kind of doomsday and extinction scenarios. They cause people to despair. We do have what it takes to manage this revolution because we are creating it. This is not the dinosaurs being extinguished by an asteroid coming from outer space that they have no way of even understanding, let alone controlling. This is a process which, at least for now, is under human control. In 5 years, in 10 years, we will have millions and even billions of AI agents taking more and more decisions, inventing more and more ideas. It will be a hybrid society. So it will become more difficult, but we need to start with the realization that this is a completely human-made danger. We have everything we need in order to manage it. The main missing ingredient is trust between human beings. And again, over tens of thousands of years, we have demonstrated that we are capable of building trust, even on a global level. So it's not beyond our capabilities. And it then goes back, to the old questions of politics and ethics, of how do you build trust between human beings. And we need to think also about more kind of concrete and immediate questions. One of the biggest questions we will be facing in the next few years is how to deal with these new AI agents.
Yes.
Do we consider them as persons? More and more people are entering relationships, personal relationships with AIs. More and more corporations and armies are giving AIs control, agency over important decisions. This is not, some kind of philosophical question.
No,
It's a
real.
completely, should AIs have the ability to open a bank account and manage a bank account? That's a very practical question. We are very close to the point when you can tell an AI, go out there, make money. Your goal is to make $1 billion. In computer science, very often the difficult question is, how do you define the goal? And one of the things about money, it's a very easy goal to define. Now, an AI can make money in many ways. It can hire its services to people to write their essays or books or whatever, many things it can do. It can earn money. It can then invest this money in the stock exchange. So do we as a society want to allow AI agents, and then this is not a question for 50 years. This is a question for 5 years, maybe 1 year, to open bank accounts and manage them in any way they see fit. In the US, basically, the legal system, they never thought about it, but I'm not sure about the situation in the UK, but in the US, there is an open legal path for AIs to be recognized as persons with rights.
Yes, Pete Singer has written about this and others.
According to US law, corporations are persons and they have rights like freedom of speech.
Yes.
Now, so in the US, you can incorporate an AI, Previously, when you incorporated a corporation like Google or General Motors or whatever, this was a fiction.
Yeah.
Because all the decisions of Google were made by human beings.
Yes.
So, okay, legally, Google is a person with rights, but every decision of Google needs a human executive, accountant, engineer, lawyer to make the decision. Yeah. Now this is no longer the case. Yeah. You can incorporate an AI, and the AI can make the decisions by itself.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that the US Supreme Court recognized corporations as persons is in order to make it possible for corporations to donate money to politicians. This was the Citizens United Supreme Court decision. Right. Now, so imagine an AI that makes billions of dollars. It's maybe the richest person in the US in a few years will not be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. It will be an AI. Yeah. And this AI has the freedom of speech, which includes the right to donate money to politicians, maybe on condition that they further advance rights for AI.
Absolutely, and reduce guardrails and so forth. Yes.
Now, this is a completely realistic scenario. This is not like science fiction.
No, absolutely.
So, and this is a question that we as a society need to decide, do we acknowledge AIs as persons with rights? Now, there are people who are already convinced that AIs, because they have interaction with them, have consciousness, have feelings. So maybe in a few years the world is divided between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't.
Absolutely. And I suppose for everyone in the room there's a consideration. I remember I gave a talk on AI back in 2015 in Haeunwae, and I said that the way things are going, there are certain jobs that people might not have. I said, for example, if you have a child who's studying to be a doctor, that's fine, but maybe a radiologist. And woman put her hand up very crossly and said, my daughter's studying radiology. And I said, well, you know, imagine that every mammogram ever taken is available to an AI and it can examine thousands in a second and make a judgment on it. A radiologist is going to go out of work. Now, who's going to go out of work here? I don't know if the chief financial officer is president of Octopus, but I have been sort of talking to some people who say that the first really high-level job to be replaced by an AI completely will be a CFO. They can be so well, everything they do.
I mean, it's already happened. It's news editors.
Oh, really?
One of the most important jobs in the 20th century, even before, was news editors. Yeah. The editors of the newspapers, of the television, they were extremely powerful people who control the public conversation.
Yeah. But I think what I would just end by saying to everybody is maybe don't concentrate on how efficient you are, on how brilliantly you complete a task, because that's what AI can do, especially the agentic AI that Yuval's been talking about. Concentrate on what a wonderful human being you are, how kind you are, how courteous, how considerate, how you improve the life of those around you, which is very often the opposite of what efficient people do. And maybe that, for the time being, at least, is the secret, that human exceptionalism will be how good we are as people, how much we make a room light up when we walk into it, how much pleasure we spread, not how quickly we can complete a task, because we'll never match the AI. So on that note, at least I think we should end, and I hope we haven't given too much terror to everybody. I will always say that the thing about this technology is it's simultaneously thrilling and chilling. And the thrilling parts may well cause us all to live much longer, happier lives. We can hope so. But Yuval, as always, an absolute joy speaking to you, and thank you for...
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.